What's up, folks? Welcome to Woodworking Against the Grain. Today we're going to make this ink pen out of olive wood from Bethlehem, Israel. We'll do a little bit of turning on the lathe today. Stay tuned. Now, before I turned the camera on, I had already cut the olive wood blanks to the right length and glued in the brass inserts that go inside them. What I'm doing here is squaring the ends of the wood up so they'll be flush with the brass inserts so that all the pen parts will fit when we get ready to do the assembly. They make a tool for this called a barrel trimmer that you can buy. I don't have one yet, but a good disc sander or a belt sander works just fine as long as you keep the blank square against the disc as it turns, so you'll have a good flat surface for your wood to be meshed up with your insert. It's very important that you don't shorten that insert any when you want to stop when you get right down to that. And then once we get those ends of both of our pieces squared up and flush with the brass inserts, then we'll move over to the lathe and put our pieces on the mandrel and get ready to start doing the actual turning. But it's important to get these squared up first and get the ends of the wood flush with the ends of the brass inserts. Otherwise, this process is really pointless if your pen parts don't fit once you get through turning it on the lathe. So always square up the ends of your blanks before you turn your blanks into a round stock for your pen parts. Now we've got them mounted up on the lathe. You see they're square and they're both about 1.5 inches long. The inserts, you can't see them here, but they're inside what the mandrel goes through to turn it. I'm using just a roughing gouge chisel here. You'll notice that while this is still square, a lot of times it stops turning. The lathe doesn't stop, but this chisel, when it catches a square point, will stop the wood from turning until it gets somewhat round, and the lathe's still spinning, but it's turning on the mandrel. Sometimes it's easy to take if your blanks are square like that, if they're very big, you can run them through the bandsaw or the table saw if you want to, and cut some of that square edge off if you want to make the turning go just a little bit quicker. But as you can see, as this gets more and becomes more and more round, then it begins to turn a lot more smoothly, and you can see the chisel goes smoothly up and down the length of the mandrel here. If you want to turn these down, and you can put any shape on them you want to, but it's important that at the ends where you see the bushings on both ends of the blanks and also between the two pieces, that you take this wood right down to the same diameter as those bushings. That's what's going to cause your pen parts when you do your assembly to fit perfectly. It's to bring your stock down just flush with the mandrel, or the bushing rather, and the wood and bushing being the same size. You can put any kind of design you want in the middle of the wood, but you want your bushings and your stock to be exactly the same size on the end. Once you get it turned down to the right size on the ends, then you begin the sanding process to start to smooth this up. I'm starting with 120 grit sandpaper, and we'll run that on there. I've still got the lathe running fairly slow. It's running about 1500 RPMs right now, and we're going to sand this with 120, and now I'm using the 220 grit sandpaper just to make it a little bit smoother. You want this to be glass smooth when you get finished with it, and then we'll show you a little bit more about the waxing and the polishing process as we go along. This is 220 grit sandpaper right here that we're using, and we're about to change over to the 600 grit, which really puts a glass smooth surface on this olive wood. This olive wood is awesome to work with anyway. It's a very hard, firm wood with a very dense grain, but also has a very pronounced grain. It's very easy to see, and a lot of contrasting colors and textures in it. As you can see now, I'm going to put some paste wax on both pieces of this wood. Now you'll notice that I have moved the tool guard out of the way the lathe there. You don't want to do any sanding or waxing with that in the way, because that makes a pinch point, and it's a good way to mash your fingers. So just take your tool rest out of the way before you begin the sanding or waxing. Now I'm putting on some polish that goes over the wax, and this stuff, as you'll see here in just a minute as we begin to buff this in, really makes this pen shine and come to life. We're going to just take a blue shop towel here as this paste wax and polish dries a little bit, and take a blue shop towel and just begin to buff that and bring that shine out. I've got the lathe going about 1500 here, and in a minute I'll turn it up to about 3000, and you'll see just how much of a shine that this really puts on this pen as we go through this process. Those blue shop towels that you get are really good for this because they don't leave hardly any lint, and they are also pretty tough. You can wrap that around that as it's turning and put a little bit of resistance on your pen stock, and cause this to have a really high sheen when you get through buffing it out. And now we've moved over to the assembly table, and you'll see I've pressed the end into the writing end of this first blank. Now I'm going to put the insert in there that will, the mechanical insert that holds the pen refill. And you've got to mash that in there, press that in there to just the right distance in order for your pen. This one happens to be a twist type pen, so that when you twist your pen to open it or to extend the writing tip, that all this distance has to be done just right. Now there's a centerpiece that goes between the two blanks, and you also press on the top cap and the pocket clip, and as this comes together, you see we've got a nicely turned olive wood ink pen.